got a couple minutes after the hour. So welcome everybody to our Citrus Stress Solutions webinar. Really appreciate everybody logging on. We've got a nice list of attendees here from all over the world. Actually, had some people on, I think, from New Zealand. I think they've got a pretty different time change there from us, but we appreciate them on. And a lot of people joining us from Florida, as well as California and Georgia and some other citrus growing regions around the United States and the world. So welcome everybody. And I wanted to start out and welcome to our speakers as well. So we've got two guest speakers today, and I really appreciate them being on, and we'll introduce them as we come to their sections here within the presentation. So I wanted to start with a little just a pretty picture of some citrus and maybe a little frame of reference to get things started. So these are lemons, obviously, I guess. Took this picture a couple years ago, and so this is our goal as citrus farmers, citrus consultants, is to produce quality fruit that hits a high market. Hopefully, we don't have a lot of control on that one, but at least and try and maintain tree vigor and its ability to produce fruit reliably under stress conditions. We're going to talk a lot today about stress and what we can do to allow the tree to continue to thrive with even under stress conditions. I had a little personal story I wanted to, I guess, share to start this off. And a couple of years ago, we had a wonderful heat event here in California on the coastal region of California, where usually our summer highs in most of our citrus growing regions, we hit maybe, I don't know, 95. We peak to 102 every once in a while, but we're averaging, like today it's going to be 95, it'll be 100 tomorrow. So that's pretty standard for our summer conditions here. But we went to 117, and we ended up with a lot of this, even on the coast where we have a lot of soft trees that may barely get over 85 degrees. A lot of the time we see a lot of this. Now, that was a pretty stressful event, but one thing that it really highlighted was some orchards did this, where there wasn't a yellow fruit left on the tree, and other orchards held on to the majority of their fruit and actually were able to pick into a really high market because there was a huge shortage on the market. Now, those growers that were able to retain fruit, it really highlighted the ability that they had to maintain their tree vigor and their tree's ability to deal with stress. So it really, we had some clients we were working closely with that really came through this heat event better than a lot of their neighbors, and it really highlighted the ability to to really push a tree and allow it to deal with really excessive amounts of stress. So it's pretty exciting. I think a lot of you are familiar with things like this too, where we just have a stressed out tree and we're trying to grow it back and deal with stress. So that was my first experience with a massive acute heat stress event. It was pretty exciting to see how different orchards responded and kind of linking that to management tactics. So with that, I'd like to introduce kind of what we're going to be talking about today. We'll kick it off here in just a minute with our keynote speaker, Ben McLean out of Florida. Will be talking to us about the state of the Florida citrus industry. Then we'll follow that up with John Kelly from Redox, who will be addressing kind of the role of calcium in root stress and plant stress in general. And then we'll go to our next will be David Holden from California. He'll be speaking from Holden Research and Consulting about agriculture stress mitigators, and I'll finish us off here at the end about plant stress and soil health. So a little bit of housekeeping to start up. If you have questions throughout, there's a chat function on your app there or on your desktop that you're able to type in questions. Please send questions through there. We'll try to monitor those and keep track of them as we get going. There's also a little raise hand button that they'll also ding us on our side to try and get, if you're having a hard time getting our attention. You've also got, if you've got our contact information, I mean, feel free to text me or John or anybody if you have questions as well, if you can't figure out how to use those functions. If you're on a mobile device and you're out in a truck or whatever, it should be able to play through your car speakers, and you should also be able to leave the app, and the audio should continue to roll, so you can check your emails and things like that if you need to during the meeting. And then CCA hours, we have 2 hours of crop management that are available. We will distribute those at the end after the questions. We have the QR code that will pop up on the screen so you can take a picture, or we'll also send out the sign-up sheet with the QR code at the end after the meeting. So with that, I want to do a little introduction to Redox. So Redox exists to create passion and excitement about growing plants That really is the base of, I think, a lot of why we started in agriculture. A lot of us are in agriculture because of that reason, that plants and growing food is really an exciting profession, with never a dull moment in many cases. Redox really concentrates on three core values. The first being passionately authentic, creatively driven, and then scientifically knowledgeable, and bringing those values to our client base. To put it simply, Redox is a bionutrient company that focuses on sustainable plant nutrition. And I hope that we can kind of communicate some of those fun tools that we brought into the market to you guys today towards the end, but mostly concentrate on the agronomics of how they came about and why we are where we are. So with that, I'd like to hand the screen over to Ben McLean. Ben is a third-generation Florida citrus grower and has served for 8 years on the Citrus Research Board in Florida. So we're looking forward to hearing his perspective starting now. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Danny. It's a pleasure to join you, and appreciate the invitation from John Kelly and the opportunity to just share with you about the citrus greening disease. As you said, I'm Florida citrus grower here. I'm in a family business, multi-generational, and we grow both organic and conventional citrus as a family and as a team. I've been the head of research for Uncle Matt's Organic for about the last 20 years, and you'll see that branded orange juice in your Whole Foods, natural food channels, and here in the Southeast in Publix. So that's, I'm involved in this challenge of citrus nutrition and stress daily, and this disease certainly does pose a lot of challenges to it. For those that aren't familiar, citrus greening its origin is from China. It's called Huanglongbing. That meant yellow dragon disease. Parts of the canopy will go yellow while other parts will remain green, so hence the kind of the common name citrus greening. It's pretty much endemic in China. It's also been in places like South Africa and Australia, Brazil. It was first detected in Florida in 2005 in a commercial grove. It's quickly spread that by about 2012, I think we estimated over 80% of all of our citrus groves were infected. And I would say now we're virtually 100% infected across the entire state. The disease is a bacterial disease caused by Candidatus liberibacter asiaticus. We just call it CELOS for short. It's vectored by the Asian citrus psyllid, an insect, Diaphorina citri, if you're interested in the scientific name. The psyllid, by and large, feeds on the new flush, the tender flush, and if she's infected with the bacteria in her gut, in the process of feeding primarily on the phloem, she injects that pathogenic bacteria into the phloem of the citrus tree. It is a phloem mobile pathogen, unfortunately. It will translocate down to the roots of the citrus tree where the damage begins. Our root biologist, Dr. Jim Graham, he's recently retired professor at University of Florida based in the Lake Alfred Experiment Station in Central Florida. He and Dr. Evan Johnson have some really good published research that documents how even before visual symptoms begin, roughly 50% of the root mass can be lost due to this, this bacterial infection. The plant responds in a variety of ways to it. It tries to wall the pathogen off, and you get a lot of phloem necrosis, so you can get some twig dieback. You'll see what we call blotchy mottle, which is really a side effect visually of starch accumulation in the leaves, because once again, you can't move sugars, photosynthetic sugars up and down like you need to. It's essentially a circulatory disease, and it's a circulatory failure of the tree that ultimately, like I said, results in a pretty significant reduction of your root mass. In the advanced stages of the disease, you'll get 70 to 80% root loss. And the root tip damage obviously plays itself out on several levels. The first of which obviously is water stress and lack of calcium uptake. And I'll get to that in a minute. What you see visually as symptoms, though, is you begin to see a thin canopy develop. You see smaller leaves than what you normally see. You begin to see fruit drop, obviously, premature fruit drop, pre-harvest is the single biggest symptom. And, you know, many grows that can approach 50% of your crop will drop on the ground 30 to 60 days prior to your harvest. It also results in a lot of fruit that's small and sour in taste. So you have an internal quality, reduction that's just as bad as the external quality reduction. Some of the numbers to tell you about the impact: in 2009, Florida citrus industry harvested 166 million boxes of round oranges. And those are 90-pound field boxes. And in 2020, last season we just concluded in June, we only harvested 67 million. And most of that loss is due to greening. We had a little bit of loss due to real estate development and things, but most of that is greening related due to tree decline. And unfortunately, the preliminary estimates of our current crop are even smaller than that. So you see, it's been a significant reduction in the volume of the crop, but the hidden story too has been a significant reduction in internal quality as well too. So, those impacts have been devastating, to say the least. Now, there are some people that are living with it. There's growers that are seeing stabilization in their production. We've obviously got some research solutions that have come forward that have helped us, but we certainly don't have any proverbial silver bullets, if you will. So now to just kind of work through the solutions. One of the biggest things that if you're going to have to deal long-term with citrus greening, probably the single biggest solution that has come out of the University of Florida has been a genetic solution. We have a robust breeding program, and we've come up with some varieties of both rootstocks and scions that are tolerant. They're not resistant, but they're tolerant. So long-term, we're going to see more replanting of those varieties. But for an existing orchard, existing tree population that has it. One of the big things, like I said, as you see the root density decrease, and the main thing that you'll see is a loss of root tip and root tip function. Obviously, you can measure lower calcium up in the tree immediately. And that lack of calcium will also lead to the premature fruit drop that you see. You'll see the stem end will start breaking down. So one of the biggest things that Dr. Quaccio that I met down in Brazil on my travels with the research board, he said that calcium is probably the single biggest limiting factor in this citrus greening disease due to the root disruption. So much so that we actually, just as an aside, within my Uncle Matt's farm plan, we did 2 years of extended sap analyses and sent in over 200 samples where we compared adjacent trees within the same blocks for sap analyses, healthy versus unhealthy. And we based it all on whether a tree was symptomatic or asymptomatic. And we found literally that the difference was almost 2x difference of calcium flowing in the sap for an asymptomatic tree versus one that was symptomatic. And we also found that the potassium-calcium ratio would be much higher in symptomatic trees, meaning that the tree was disproportionately taking up potassium over calcium. So those two materials are very important in your greening management. Now, in Florida, there's been, as I was telling John a few weeks ago, there's really about 7 practices that are common, more or less, to growers that are successfully managing the disease, and that's a relative term. But, one of the first things you'll see is increasing irrigation frequency due to the restriction of the root system. That kind of common sense. But the other one that's important too that you'll see is calcium management. Growers will have to start applying a lot more calcium nitrate liquid or other sources of calcium. Of course, if you're organic like myself, you have to try to come up with some other ideas for supplying it versus calcium nitrate. Foliar sprays of calcium products became very important as well. That's a common solution, that you have to apply a lot more calcium in your program. Second one, you have to manage the pH in your wetted zones because once again, since root function is compromised, it's critical to make sure that pH is in the 5.5 to 6.5 range where you get the optimal absorption of many of your micronutrients. Another key factor is you have to manage your potassium. Often growers in Florida and Brazil are making more frequent applications of potassium, going to 4 to 6 applications of a year rather than 2. may not change the overall elemental amount that you're applying, but certainly increasing the frequency. Another interesting factor that you'll find common in the success is the introduction of organic and biological components. Because root health and root function are so critical and so important in this disease because of the stress that the tree is continually under. And as I said, it's an additional stress from what already exists in the environment, right? Because this is a compromised root system that we're dealing with. Is the introduction, we've seen a lot more people using compost. Compost or sludge, biological products applied through the irrigation system, humic, fulvic acid products. I've yet to see a successful grower that stabilized the disease and managing his orchard that isn't on some kind of aggressive program of this, I call it organic biological component. We have very sandy soils in Florida. The exchange capacities are regularly 5 and below. We have regularly, you find less than 1% organic matter. Many of our citrus groves have been farmed since the 1920s. So, you know, you have high levels of copper and other things that you have to deal with. So we have found that introducing regular applications of compost and these other biological materials has really sometimes been a very strong foliar, how would I say this? It's a visual improvement that you can see in the orchards. And then below ground, you can often, if you're taking root samples, you can find that you are getting some root growth and health improvements. Another common management tool is regular sprays of micronutrients and phosphite materials. Phosphites enhance uptake, micronutrients and translocation. We found in Florida particularly that zinc and manganese are very important to have good to even excellent levels for these compromised trees to maintain some economic, profitable production during this time. So PO3 micronutrient foliar program, at least 3 sprays, sometimes 6, is another common successful practice. And of course, you got to control your psyllids. That's a common thing. But I think 10 years ago when this disease first hit us, a lot of my conventional friends thought that psyllid control would be the end-all be-all, area-wide psyllid sprays and low-volume sprays, sometimes 12 to 16 times a year were done by people. But that never worked well enough. It became very expensive. And I think what we found is if you just spray 3 to 5 times a year, as an organic grower, I have found that just your approved botanical oils and your approved petroleum oils as a combo works fine for keeping your psyllid populations well managed, as well as release of biological controls. We do a lot of that as well. But you do have to keep your psyllid populations somewhat under control. We do have problems sometimes in the summer that we get these massive outbreaks. Some of the groves, it seems like the heavy psyllid feeding is also a stress upon the tree itself. So once again, I don't think you'll ever be able to eradicate them. And I think we chased some fool's gold as an industry about 10, 12 years ago, thinking that we would eradicate them with pesticidal sprays, and that certainly didn't work. In Florida, we have a unique situation. There's so many residential trees and escape trees all around the state that we would never have the ability, I feel, to bring that under control as an inoculum source. So then the last thing I wanted to share about some management techniques for reducing stress, we also found in many areas we needed to reduce our glyphosate applications. Now, again, as an organic grower, obviously at Uncle Matt's, we never did that, but like I said, I'm part of a citrus growing family, and we do have some conventional acres around and conventional friends. And there's no doubt that heavy glyphosate applications in the late summer have added to that premature fruit drop that comes in the fall in our early varieties. So, you know, people have had to learn, too, to mix in some other herbicide programs and not rely so heavily just singly on glyphosate. So I think just, you know, in summary, once again, the Florida citrus industry has been dealt a really heavy blow. I mean, you know, in round numbers, we've lost about 60% of our production in the last 11 years. We do have some good tolerant varieties that have been developed by the traditional breeding program that organic growers could use, like myself, as well as obviously conventional growers. There's good promise in some of these varieties in that although they're not completely resistant, they have a high level of tolerance, and that if we implement some of these other management practices that help reduce the stress, help boost the resilience of the grove itself, help boost the efficiency of the nutrients that we apply, we found that in those situations it is a problem that we can live with. Now, hopefully, this real estate boom is going to at least stop for a while, and some of the fallow ground that's been citrus groves that's been pushed up will get replanted. We'd really like to see our industry get back up to 100 to 130 million boxes a year. I think that's where our processing capacity is at for our infrastructure. I think that's probably a good win-win situation, not too much supply either. And we are optimistic in that we've seen orange juice demand come up a good bit in the last 5 months due to the coronavirus situation. There's been a lot of generational brand equity around orange juice for cold and flu season and boosting immunity and supplying vitamin C. And where we were a declining category of consumption in prior years, 2020 has been a good year to put some optimism back into us that our product could move off the shelves as well. So again, so those are some of the things we've seen that are successful. And I do think that your talk today is timely because there's nothing like a disease that compromises your circulation and your root system to, accentuate worse than any stresses that you're already going through, and stress management with that's just absolutely critical. So that concludes my talk. I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody would have.
I got a question here in the chat from Greg that says 130 million boxes translate to how many acres in Florida?
100, if our average production came back to what it was prior to greening, where it was probably 350 boxes to the acre, in round numbers, the good, the bad, and the ugly all averaged in, I would say that 130 million boxes would be 400,000 acres of good, solid producing citrus. You've always got orchards on the margin there coming in and out of production, or that are semi-abandoned and they translate a little bit in. But I think that's probably 400 to 500,000 acres of total citrus that's healthy. That's where that would produce that type of number that you see there.
Appreciate it. I got another question here from Will. You say reduce glyphosate. What would be your favorite alternatives?
Yeah, so on the conventional system, some of my growers started, just cycling in with paraquat. They also started noticing too that you could, narrow your herbicide band down, right, and start using offset cultivation, mechanical cultivation, and some people, I have not been in that part of the business much, and I know there's several other. Bayer has a product called Allion, and there's some of the grass herbicides we see like Fusilade. But I think the single biggest choice that I saw people rotate with was paraquat, the bipyridinium.
Thank you. All right, that's the questions I've got here on my side. Really appreciate it. Here's another one. What kind of calcium product can be added to the root system on a soil with a pH of 8?
Well, I think that for that, you can still use your calcium nitrate because it really doesn't change the pH, of the soil in that area. We found that we had this same problem, that in the actual wetted zones, where with this circulatory disease, the roots were disproportionately growing now in our wetted zones. Florida, we used to have a lot of big spreading root systems, trunk to trunk, deep sands. Irrigation was a supplement. However, with greening, we began to find more and more of those roots were growing in that wetted zone because, again, the health was compromised. We found that many of those wetted zone pHs were as much as 1 whole point above outside of it, like out in the middle. It wasn't uncommon to find that 8 pH in the wetted zone and 7 pH right at the drip line or out in the middle where the irrigation didn't hit. So we would inject with various, sulfuric acid products. For me as an organic grower, I would use vinegar, this acetic acid. We use that to lower the pH in the wetted zones, and that helped. And but back to the original thing, I think the biggest thing that people have used under that higher pH system is calcium nitrate, while most importantly, using some type of sulfur to lower that pH down to get it, at 7 to 6 range.
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about other options as well. So yeah, but that's definitely calcium nitrate's the far and away the most common. So okay, cool. Any other questions we got coming in here? People typing furiously. We can loop back to questions as well. So the next section here, thank you, Ben. That was great. Learned a lot. Let's see, there we go. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen here again. And so the next section here, I recorded this video late last week, wanted to take you out in the field and just kick off kind of our discussion about calcium and kind of physiology of calcium in the soil. So it's little soil physics to kind of kick off John's discussion here. So here, let's that now.
Hi, welcome to sunny California and Citrus Grove here. I want to talk to you about the importance of calcium and some of the challenges that it takes to get that calcium from the roots, from the soil, up into your tree, and helping to build stronger cell wall structure in your roots, in your fruit, and in your leaf tissue. So in many of our citrus growing regions, including here in California, Florida, Georgia, other areas that we grow citrus, much of the soil is what we call a calcareous soil or high calcium soil. That means there's literal tons of calcium down there in the soil where the roots are. The challenge, however, is that calcium is tied up in structural mineral of that soil and also in calcium phosphate. A lot of these soils are also high in phosphorus. So the problem with those two elements is when they're in solution in the soil, they readily bind up together and form calcium phosphate. Now, calcium phosphate is what your teeth are made out of. It's a very insoluble compound once it's formed. So I wanted to show you what that looks like when we take ionic calcium and we add it into the soil in an unprotected state in a high phosphorus situation. So what I have here in my jar is a high phosphorus soil solution, and what I have here is a calcium solution from calcium nitrate. So when we take calcium nitrate, CAN17, CN9, something like that, and we add it into the soil solution, you can see that we immediately have white precipitate formed. Now that white precipitate is that calcium phosphate binding up and becoming unavailable to the plant. Now I don't want to be disingenuous here. That calcium and that phosphate can be mined out of the soil by the tree. The tree has the ability to produce organic acids and acidify that root zone, and that will allow the tree to pull that out. So let's show what that looks like here. So I have some organic acid here that we're going to dump in, and you can see that it immediately starts solubilizing that calcium phosphate. Now the problem, however, is the tree producing that organic acid. It's extremely energetically expensive. So the tree has to devote a lot of resources that could otherwise be used for building fruit or building solids in our fruit or building sugars or building tissue or building roots. So all those other places, instead of that, it's focusing on mining nutrition out of the soil. That's why we fertilize. We fertilize to provide available nutrition to that tree so the tree is able to have the resources it needs to hit the yield goals that we have and do it in an economically sustainable way. So let's talk a little bit more about the importance of calcium and its role in soil structure, as well as maybe more so on its role in root health and growing roots and producing a strong root system. So thanks for watching this.
All right, so let's. I'm going to hand over the screen here to John Kelly. John's a certified agronomist, an advisor and sustainability specialist with American Society of Agronomy. He's worked with Redox Bionutrients for 26 years, providing expertise and solutions for a variety of crops across the world. So John, I'm going to shut my screen share off here and hand over to you.
All right, how are we doing? Everybody can see the presentation now? Well, in a moment here. Okay, does that everything look okay there, Danny?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Well, I'm really pleased to spend a few minutes with you and hope it'll be beneficial. Ben, that was a fantastic overview of the Florida citrus industry. As always, very insightful. Danny, your field demonstration is perfect as introduced my topic of calcium and citrus root development. The first thing from a redox perspective, what I'd like to share is when it comes to root development, there are many factors, but we like to focus on three: phosphorus nutrition, calcium nutrition, and soluble carbon. I will touch briefly on phosphorus and carbon, but the focus of my discussion will revolve around calcium. Phosphorus, of course, is the energy molecule of the plant. It is critical as the plant attempts to take sunlight energy and convert it into chemical energy in the form of carbohydrates. And excellent phosphorus nutrition is essential not only to root development, but all functions in the plant. As Danny illustrated, one of the challenges is phosphorus in the plant available form of the chemical annotation PO4 with 2 negative charges has a very strong affinity or attraction for anything with a positive charge. So that can be anything from copper to calcium. The most common element it reacts with is calcium. And as Danny explained, as these undesirable reactions occur, when a phosphorus is applied, it ties it up and it has to go through an additional chemical reaction in order to be available to the plant. And of course, our objective when both with phosphorus and calcium is to get that through the root membrane into the plant in the ionic or plant available form. Redox has some really great tools related to phosphorus nutrition that I'm not going to take the time to explain right now, but I'll just mention that they're extremely efficient and they're very resistant to undesirable chemical reactions in the soil and in the plant. I'll touch on the role of carbon. I really appreciate Ben's comment that he doesn't know of any grower who has stabilized his greening issue that doesn't have a carbon strategy. The reason that carbon is so important is because that's what drives biological processes in the soil. And these biological processes are so critical to nutrient availability, to root development, to soil health. And of course, we could take the entire seminar and talk about some of these important benefits, but just summarize by saying it's a critical component to a root growth management program. And again, Redox has some really, really fantastic tools that can complement and be an aid to promoting soluble carbon in the soil. But let's turn our attention to the focus of my discussion, which is calcium. And just a summary, calcium from an agronomic standpoint has three key important functions. First, soil structure. Second, cell wall strength and integrity. And of course, third, root growth. Let's review these briefly because they're very important. From a structure standpoint, the soil, of course, has a net negative charge. And the colloids in the soil, as with a negative charge, of course, attract and hold elements with a positive charge, which we call cations. And the key cations in the soil are potassium, calcium, sodium, magnesium, and we should also include hydrogen, which will be present in acidic soils. But calcium amongst these cations is unique in its size and valence. And when I say size and valence, valence is it's a divalent or two positive charges, and the molecular size of calcium is unique in that it different from the other cations has this ability to hold and attract, to flocculate the soil by attaching to a colloid and attaching to another, and it pulls those together. What that does in the soil has an incredible impact on soil health, on air-water relationships. We think of this, the macropore space, where water drains by gravity, in the micropore space, where water moves by capillary movement. The calcium helps regulate the ratios of these air water relationships, which leads to better biology, better root zone in general for root growth. There's no substitute. When there are opportunities for calcium inputs to improve soil structure, there's simply no substitute for that, and they need to be considered as a high priority. The next key role of calcium is the plant cell strength, cell wall integrity. This is an extremely critical role of calcium. As cells are in the developmental stages, calcium can deposit in these cells, and it's a tremendous contributor to the relative strength of those cells. And of course, that cell content is where much of the activity is going on in the plant. Therefore, a plant with strong cells is inherently a stronger plant. I love the fact that Ben referenced the citrus affected trees with HLB. The asymptomatic trees, or those showing no symptoms, had almost twice the amount of calcium in those plants. And this, beyond cell wall integrity, calcium nutrition, higher calcium availability in plants facilitates the production of what we call antioxidants. And antioxidants are the tool plants use to fight off many stress factors, including issues like HLB. So far, I hope we're making the case here that a sound soil strategy for soil structure, as well as excellent calcium nutrition of the plant, are essential parts of a sound strategy to grow the best quality and quantity of citrus. Now let's turn our attention to the focus of my talk, which is the role of calcium in root growth. As we look at this graphic of the soil, I want to point a couple things out. First, as I mentioned previously, the macropore space in the soil is where water drains only by gravity. The micropore space is where the water moves by capillary movement, but more importantly, that is the only area of the soil where these feeder roots reside. That's where all the action occurs. This is where water and nutrients are taken up into the plant, and that root actually doesn't live in the soil. It lives on a thin film of water on these particles in the micropore space. Well, available calcium, soluble calcium, is critical to the quantity and the quality of this micropore space. And as it turns out, this root tip that Ben referenced, diminishing in the presence of HLB, relies extensively on what we call ionic calcium, or soluble calcium, calcium in a plant available form, which is the elemental form of chemical annotation Ca++. That root tip, if it does not recognize adequate calcium, or that calcium is an imbalance because of excess sodium or other issues, it will simply quit growing. That root tip can exert a lot of pressure in that soil. In fact, it will try to continue to grow up to about 300 pounds per square inch. But again, without available calcium for that root tip, it will shut down. So one of the observations that we made in Florida citrus is the groves that declined the quickest, the most dramatically, were those that had calcium imbalances and calcium opportunities. And I love the fact that Ben also referenced the tremendous fruit drop that occurs. And this is also related to calcium, because inadequate calcium uptake at the calyx in that blossom as that fruit is developing has a weak connection that is very susceptible to dropping the fruit later in the season. So with that in mind, I think we've made the case that calcium is very important. So what do we do about it? Well, first thing I would point out is having information in front of you is extremely critical to make proper decisions. It is simply impossible for anyone to guess from afar what the right input or practices is for a particular grove. One of the things that can be extremely helpful is good soil on that particular grove. At Redox, we like to look at both a chemical extraction of that soil, which gives us kind of an overview of the macro content of that chemical content of that soil, as well as a paste extraction. Now, this soil here, I grabbed randomly. I assure you this is not a Florida sugar sand soil with a high CEC, but it illustrates a point. In this case, we have a soil with very high total calcium, very high. In fact, it's base saturation 85%. Okay. However, if we look at this pH of 8.3, this is the paste extraction, we have inadequate availability. So what that can do is help drive the decision-making process. What needs to happen here? Do we need acid-based inputs? Do we need improved biological activity to solubilize that calcium? Do we need to be supplementing at critical physiological stages to enhance what's occurring in the soil? But I emphasize, if we don't have this information in front of us, we're guessing. So I highly recommend that you gather information to determine what calcium practices and inputs are going to have the greatest impact. Now, Redox has some fantastic tools for calcium. And if I can humbly say, some of the best in the industry. However, these tools we're typically trying to take a broad perspective on what is going to be the optimum net benefit under a particular situation, and we can help you identify where these tools might fit into your program. I'm just going to talk about one of these, and it's Mainstay Calcium. Mainstay Calcium is a liquid calcium. It's 20% calcium. It's derived from calcium carbonate, but it's a reacted material. It goes through what we call an microencapsulation process, wherein we are able to protect that calcium, that double positive charge, from undesirable reactions. So a soil application It moves readily in that root zone, very, very low propensity to tie up with phosphorus or other elements in the soil, passes through the root membrane. And this product, what we do is we utilize this at critical stages. So during bloom, post-bloom, during cell wall development would be very important. When we're trying to get root growth initiation, we would incorporate this technology. In summary, what I'd like to say, or hopefully I've made the case, that an improved root development strategy requires a sound calcium strategy. And I appreciate the opportunity to participate.
All right, thanks, John. Do we have any questions for John? And he'll be available at the end as well if you're still formulating your questions here. Okay. So if you have questions for John, we can answer those at the end as well. Next up in our program is David Holden. And David has over 35 years of experience as an agronomist and pest control advisor on the California coast, working with over 100 different commodities. We grow a lot of different stuff here on the coast. He has an active research program providing data to hundreds of companies over his career. And we do a decent amount of work with David as well and really appreciate his sound scientific advice and results that we get. So with that, I will hand this over to David. And let's see, I hit that button. And then David, you should have the opportunity to share your screen now.
Okay, is that up now?
That is up.
And is my volume correct?
You're still a little quiet, but
Okay,
if that's what you can do.
Put the mic right in my mouth here.
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
Oh, yeah, it's still a little quiet, but go ahead, speak up, and
well,
we'll make do.
So thank you, Danny. I know you pulled that off my website because actually I've been around for about 45 years now. So I guess it's time to update my website and give everybody more information. Thank you for having me. Ben McLean and I have known each other for 25 years through different venues, and his insights as to ACP and HLB in Florida have helped us out here. Danny and I reside in probably the highest infestation of ACP in the state of California. We have not had a confirmed HLB find here, although we have used dogs that are been trained in Florida to smell out the disease in the trees, and we have had trees that have been sat-armed by the dogs to say that we probably do have HLB in our orchards, but we have no PCR tests to confirm that. In fact, the first HLB infected psyllid was found in a commercial orchard 2 weeks ago in Riverside County. So our development of HLB in California has been a lot slower than development in Florida. But we're more temperate than subtropical, and we don't have hurricanes going crisscross across the state all the time to help move that pest and disease around. So I appreciate everything that Ben had to share. And I appreciate John's very concise presentation on calcium, and hopefully I can do similar as I give you this presentation on biostimulants. As you note, I put in parentheses ASM, and I am not calling, for those of you that have been involved with biostimulants.
David, I can't see your slides yet.
Okay, let's see what's going on. Just share. Are they up now?
Nope. What's going on?
Oh, here. Okay, should be up now.
Yep, now we're good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as you notice from my slide, what I'm going to talk about today is biostimulants, but I really want to present them from a different perspective. And Danny asked me to speak about them in the broad marketplace and my work. And I probably have done more work with this category of biostimulants than anybody else in the state of California. That's not, I'm just telling you the facts. I probably have done, between 2005 and today, I probably have done 800 research trials, in-field trials, or in nurseries with biostimulant type products. And I've come to the firm conclusion that we've categorized them with the wrong name. We should call them agricultural stress mitigators. And that would be both abiotic stress and biotic stress. And I'll explain that later. I just think biostimulants as a general category have gotten a bad rap. And I want to explain briefly today where I've seen them work. So with that, I'll get started. First of all, what is a biostimulant? Well, it was finally officially recognized by the USDA in 2018 Farm Bill. And I'll give you their definition in a minute. But in California, they are generally managed by the CDFA as an auxiliary soil and plant substance. I don't know about those of you that are here from New Zealand and Australia and Florida and other parts, but that's how we handle them here. So they're basically a fertilizer. And as I say here, there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace as to what these are, and a lot of people look at them very skeptically. I am a researcher, and I am built to be skeptical. And I will tell you that I've seen some very nice results with biostimulants when they're utilized in the right capacity. I have a big disclaimer here because California is very critical of this area and watching. And I may show you pest management effects, but I'm not claiming or promoting pesticidal qualities in these products. Okay, a healthy plant is a happy plant, and so a lot of the pest management effects we see is just because the plants are in better shape because of these agricultural stress mitigators. So the 2018 Farm Bill defined biostimulants as a substance or microorganism that when applied to seeds, plants, or the rhizosphere, and John just gave you a good definition of the rhizosphere, stimulates natural processes to enhance or benefit nutrient uptake, nutrient efficiency, tolerance to abiotic stress, or crop quality and yield. And I've done research in all those areas with these products. And if anybody is confused as to what these products are, Ascophyllum nodostrum seaweed from the North Atlantic is one. Seaweed from the South Atlantic is another. There's kelp that is harvested, I believe it's on King Island, if that's correct, between the mainland in Australia and Tasmania. There's a kelp that is harvested there. There's South American kelp, and then there's kelp that comes from regions beyond. I've seen all kinds of kelps marketed from India and China. I'm not sure where they all come from, but there's a lot of them out there marketed. But most of my experience is with the North Atlantic Ascophyllum nodostrum. There's other biological products, blends of bacilluses and fungi. There are other chemicals that act as in this category, some of which are marketed by Redox. So it's a broad category that we're dealing with. So just to redefine that, I see them in three major categories. They're either abiotic or biotic stress mitigators. They're biome influencers. And Danny just mentioned this earlier that, you know, you can have calcium phosphate in the soil, but that material can be broken down in the rhizosphere by chemistry exuded by the plant or other biological bacteria that chew up some of these elements. And so that's where they can work as biome influencers. Primers is a suggested area that says once you put something on, it changes the way the plant genetically responds from that point on. I don't know that I've seen anything that really fits that category, but that's been suggested as a category that these products work in. Sometimes we see them working in a competitive inhibition of pathogens in the rhizosphere. If you have a bacteria or a fungi that grows rapidly in the root zone and it keeps that root from becoming infected by another disease, then that's a competitive inhibition. Trichoderma may be an example of that, where it grows around the root zone and you don't get phytophthora infections or you don't get fusarium infections in the root zone. Stimulation of the plant's natural defense mechanisms or processes of soil-bound nutrients is another suggested mode of action. And one thing I want to really emphasize here is they are supplemental in nature. That is, they are not a replacement for the 17 essential elements, but they can come help alongside fertilization and pest control. And those of us in the States and probably areas beyond have seen that in this whole COVID outbreak. And you'll get where I'm going if I make sense to you. You know, there are wants and needs, and I want to go out to eat, and I want to have a good Mexican meal with a beer, but I don't get to do that as often as I used to. But that's a want. It's not necessarily a need. I've still got plenty of food. I'm cooking dinner and all that, and it's been noted in my income. My spending has dropped in the area of eating out, and that's not a need. That's just a want. And sometimes these products are areas of want, and they're not necessarily need. They're not meant to replace those 17 essential elements we have. We've seen them work in the area of increasing nutrient use efficiency. I did a 3-year study for the California Celery Research Board looking at nitrogen reduction. This is something that's coming to us quickly in the state of California, but we are being told that we need to reduce our leaching of nitrates, and so we are working our methodologies to help grow the same crops and reduce nitrogen. I already talked about competitive inhibition of pathogens and stimulation of natural defenses, and that they're supplemental. So this is it's a long paragraph, but I'm going to read it to you. This is my basic perspective on biostimulants or agricultural stress mitigators. I view them in the same way I view insurance. Do you need every insurance policy out there? No. Is some insurance good? Yes. The crops we work with need all essential sunlight, climate, nutrients, pest management we can provide to be grown successfully. Sometimes we do not get the perfect conditions. A lot of times we desire to grow these crops. During those periods of abiotic or biotic stress, I have seen crops in the biostimulant category, products in the biostimulant category help to supplement the crop when under those stress conditions and in a significant way. And I mean statistically significant. I'm collecting data that's statistically significant, so we know it's valid. It's probably in that manner valid. Many times they work as an insurance policy against stress. This is not to say that they do not work during ideal growing conditions, but much of the success I've seen in this class of products has been during periods or times of stress. Okay. So I just kind of want to emphasize that, because you may run into somebody promoting a product that just paints this real broad brushstrokes picture that it solves all your problems. And I would be a little skeptical if you're presented with products in that manner. They should be viewed as a very tactical way to approach certain problems we may have. And I reside on the coast of California, northwest of Los Angeles, and we are heavily, we are a large citrus and avocado district, and then also vegetables and heavy strawberry production also, and other berries, including raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries. And as Danny inferred, Danny saw 117 degrees, maybe even 119 degrees in his neighborhood a couple of years ago, 2018 heat stroke. I mean, it was unbelievable. And it was up to 110 down on the coast. And we do face that once in a while, and that's a true stress event that I would see where biostimulants can help. And I'm going to show you some data that kind of confirms that. So what causes stress to our crops? Heat. Abiotic stress would be something that's not biological, not live. So heat, drought, wind, salt, poor water quality, reduced nutrient inputs, frost. Biotic stress would be mites, insects, disease, etc. You may have some other categories that you want to add to this, but that's what I would define abiotic stress and biotic stress. So Danny referred to this 117 to 119 degree event. That was July 6th through the 8th or 9th, 2018. I don't think anybody of us that lived through it will ever forget the dates. But we also had a stress event in October the first week of October 2015, and I was involved in a strawberry project down on the coast. And I mean, when I was on the coast, we were less than 1,000 feet from the Pacific Ocean where these strawberries were being grown. And we were supposed to have a warm day. If you notice on my picture here of my iPhone uh, uh, screenshot, it was supposed to be 101 degrees that day and 66, cool down again in the evening. Well, I took this picture at 11 o'clock in the morning. It was 107 degrees, and it was a compression heating day, and it hit 107, and it just stayed there for hours, 8 hours. The next day it was a little lower, maybe 104 degrees. The next day it was maybe 100. But I had these strawberries on the coast that I had various products, 40 products. This bar graph shows all those products. And this is a representation here. Let me turn my pointer into a laser pointer. This is a representation, and I've just given you treatments numbers. I don't tell you what these products are, but there were seaweeds, there was worm frass extracts, there were biologicals, there was humic acid, there were all kinds of things in here. And this was our production on the berries for the 3 weeks prior to the stress, 2 or 3 weeks prior to the stress event. In other words, this shows if 100% was the grower standard, which you'll see right here, 36% of these products were doing better than 10% better in yields during that first 3 weeks than the grower standard. And one was even up to almost 45% greater. And a few were down in the 90, nothing was less than 90%. And I consider something significant that is plus or minus 10%. So I don't consider that really significantly low, or over here, this significantly higher. But once we get above that 10% range, something was happening. Well, we then looked at the data that we collected after this heat event, and our production went from 120 flats a week down to about 30 flats a week on our grower standard. And not one of the biostimulants I was using was below 100%. And 71% of those products were greater than 10% increase in yield following that stress event. That was a significant jump. We almost doubled what was happening after the stress event. And that really convinced me in 2015, once I looked at the data, that these things, and I've been told this, and many of you have probably been told it too, that they're stress mitigators. But this was a real eye-opener to me. And as you notice, this was an overlay application. So these were in addition to the grower's normal practices of NPK and pest management. This is really convincing data, and it just so happened, and these 40 treatments were all not in the same place. They were spread out over an 80-acre strawberry planting. I mean, we took on a big chunk when we did this one, but it was very significant, and it was a game changer for me in how I look at these products. So I present this just as a kind of a confirmation of my perspective that they're stress mitigators. So prior to this, I'd done a study for 3 years, and this was done for Acadian out of Nova Scotia with their Ascophyllum seaweed. And we looked at production and mites and thrips in avocados. And again, I'm not claiming that we were controlling these pests, but we were reducing populations. This was a 3-year study. It's actually a peer-reviewed study. I presented it at the First World Congress on the use of biostimulants in agriculture in Strasbourg in 2012. If you go on my website, I think I have it posted, the study posted. Holden Research is my website if you want to see this study and the details on it, but I'm going to give you just some overview on it. We have a pest that came into California in the late 1900s called avocado thrips. It's the sclerothrips, and it does this. We used to call them spuds on the tree. They make these they just make them looking like potatoes. No offense to you Washington and Iowa or Idaho people are with us, but they really scar the avocado, and they actually don't grow when they have this much damage. They don't. Normal avocados 8 ounces. They probably don't get larger than 2 or 3 ounces when they have this much damage on them. So one of the things we looked at, and so we had a control, we had abamectin, which, you know, you may know it as agronomic. There's a lot of abamectins out there. We had abamectin, and then we had seaweed all by itself, the Acadian seaweed, and then we had abamectin with the seaweed, and they all went on with 1% 415 spray oil as a carrier. What was interesting is we definitely got increase in yields where we had the seaweed. This is Acadian put on foliar, this is Acadian through the soil, and this is the Acadian plus abamectin. This is abamectin by itself, and this is untreated check. Nothing was put on. So we got a growth response, a yield response, a sizing response. This was a set response to these applications in this one evaluation in 2011. But what's even more interesting is these are the thrip populations over time from the pre-treat, which was about May 10th till 53 days after treatment, which was somewhere close to August 1st. And the blue line, this line, is our untreated check, and the thrips will peak out and drop and peak out as they cycle through their populations. But and this is statistically significant at 95% confidence rate. In all cases where we treated with abamectin or abamectin plus Acadian or Acadian by itself, we had significantly less thrips populations over time. Again, I don't know if it made the Acadian made the environment untenable to the thrips, or the plant was stronger, and so the thrips couldn't reproduce quite as greatly. But it was very significant to see this, that under the stress of the thrips, we had a reduction in thrips population. Again, I don't claim that the Acadian was killing thrips. I don't think it's a side in the traditional sense of a biocide or a pesticide. But this was very interesting data, and I've seen this over and over again. I've seen it on mites in strawberries. I've seen it on thrips in strawberries. I've seen it on diseases in strawberry like botrytis and powdery mildew. So they just do something genetically or manipulation of the plant to help the plant survive under these stress situations a little better. Danny hired us to do a trial with in lemons, and this was run between 2016 and 2018, I believe. And we looked at a Root RX and a Root RX plus a Redox foliar program, and it was replicated. We had 8 trees per row. It was replicated. We had an untreated control, which really was the grower standard, and then these were the grower standards overlaid with the Redox programs. Root RX at 1.5 gallons per year. That was 3 applications, a half gallon each time. And then we made 2. Then we had a third program that had the Root RX plus a foliar program, which is right here. And we assess canopy quality and kind of a generalized yield in this field. And yield in lemons is really hard to to get. We pick our lemons 3-4 times a year, and it's they're broken down into 8 size classes and 3 quality classes, and so it's really difficult to get solid yield data. But we did some estimation on the tree to come up with some data for you. And what we found is that we had significant improvement over time in the canopy of these trees. And those are in my background picture is those trees that we worked in. That's just a background picture from that orchard. And we saw significant increase in canopy quality with the Redox foliar and Root RX program. The data was not significantly different with the Root RX by itself, but it was a 25% increase in canopy greenness and coverage. So 25% is a pretty good number. And we were getting that out of the Redox the Root RX by itself. Then if you look at tree vigor rating, and this is just a 0 to 5 scale, 0 meaning that the tree is dead, 5 is about as healthy as it can be. And this is an orchard that is a little weak. It's a rootstock that doesn't do well in our soils. It does really well in sandy soils down in the desert of California, but not on our heavy soils. And so we've been trying to improve the vigor of this orchard for years. And if you look at the line graphs, you'll notice that we saw overall improvement in the grower standard. I mean, it went from 3.1 to a rating of 3.5 over time. But we saw even more significant improvement with the Root RX and the Root RX plus foliar program. And you'll see where we have these asterisks. That indicates a 95% confidence, significant difference in what we were seeing over time. And notice that it didn't happen up front, but over time, starting in December through the September of the next year, we saw a significant bigger increase in these trees. And we saw significant yield increases. And again, this is some rough data we collected, but this was pounds per sample area that we saw a 23% yield increase. So we helped to size this fruit a little better and retain more fruit. This is a quick picture. On the right is the Redox treated. On the left is untreated, and you can see a little greener quality in it. Granted, one's the right side and the left side, but Danny and I noted that from the very beginning. It just popped out, and quite often I don't see a visual difference. I have to quantify. I have to collect data to confirm that things are happening in an orchard. Danny, how am I doing on time?
You're good. Keep going.
Okay. Just didn't want to overstay my welcome. We're getting close to it here. So something I initiated last year was there's a biostimulant product that I like called Grozyme, and I wanted to add it. And it's not a live cell. It's metabolites of a fermented product. But there's some peer-reviewed papers, one particular on sunflowers, that support that it enhances zinc uptake. Now, why zinc? I can't tell you, unless it's stimulating some genetic code in the plant to process zinc better. But what we've done is we've looked at this in combination with various zincs. And so these are foliar applications on young lemons. We put 100 gallons per acre on. We put very light amounts of zinc manganese on, 0.05 pounds of metal per acre per application. And then they had the leaf sampled and sampled at 7 days, 14 days, and 21 days post-treat. This is a very busy graph, so forgive me for it. But what it shows is that we had significant, here's the Grozyme alone, and it had some influence on zinc uptake. But when you combine it, and you get over here and you combine it with, there's Redox's triplex micro, and this is FBS's zinc manganese, and this is zinc manganese sulfate by itself. And when you combine it, the Grozyme with these products, you get significantly better zinc uptake over time than you did without combining this Grozyme. So this is the zinc, this is the manganese, and the difference between the Albion program and the Redox program and the FB Science program and the zinc sulfate, you'll notice they're all A's. So they're not statistically separated from each other. And one time one looks better than the other, but the purpose of this trial was to look at the Grozyme and its effect on these products and increasing zinc uptake. And we've seen that happen. I repeated this trial with a soil application in this past winter, and right now I'm doing that again for somebody else with Redox's zinc, and we're looking at that again with and without this Grozyme product. But again, we had a 28% improvement in uptake on Redox's triplex micro in the strawberry leaves through a soil application through the use of this Grozyme in combination with the triplex micro. And this is the same thing with the manganese. So somehow this biological metabolite is influencing these general applications of these materials. Okay, I'm getting to the end here. So what are these agricultural stress mitigators? And some would say they're snake oils. And we hear this quite often. We go to me, oh yeah, you're gonna give me a presentation again on a snake oil. But Patrick Brown up at UC Davis kind of likes to refer to them as more a can of worms. And I think the can of worms is more with marketing departments than it is functionality of these products. They, in the right circumstances, are functional. But the can of worm is when they're over marketed or marketed for something they're not meant to be utilized for. And as I say, we all buy insurance, and that's where I see these products working. If you have a concern for a stress, this is where they work, or they may enhance nutrient uptake. They're not silver bullets, but they're just a tool in your tool case. Well, thank you. That's all I had to present for you. Danny, you got any questions? Or?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, if people want to type in their questions. We got one already. It says, how did you measure tree vigor?
It's a subjective measurement, and you take an average tree and it's a 3, and a tree that's worse than that's a 2, and a really bad tree is a 1, and a really great healthy with nice canopy. And again, it's just a subjective analysis, and if you do it over and over again with enough people and enough time, you'll get some pretty significant data. So that's how it was. We also used, I didn't mention it, we also used a piece of software that you can put on your iPhone. That we were looking at the greenness, and it's called Canopio. You can find it. It's Oklahoma State University. Canopio is spelled CANOPEO, and it will give you a black and white photo. You'll take a photo, and it will give you a measurement of canopy coverage or ground coverage, and it works very well in giving you consistent information on how, just kind of a general idea of the vigor of the plant, or how it's covering, how it's growing.
Thanks. Oh, I guess I'm supposed to click that. Okay. Any other questions for David? Anybody wants to chime in? All right. See, David, if you want to stop sharing your slides.
Yeah, get back to my pointer options and stop share. Okay.
And then I will share mine. I do have one more question for you, David, if you want to unmute yourself here. We got any quantifications of ROS?
ROS?
I'm not sure what ROS is.
Or ROI, return on investment.
Paul, you want to clarify on that question? Reactive oxygen species.
Oh. That's kind of what you and I are talking about doing, right, Danny?
To some extent, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't have, no, I have no data to share on that right now.
Okay. All right, thanks for the question. Okay, thanks, David. Really appreciate that coverage of biostimulants, agricultural stress mitigators. I like that variant there. That's very nice.
Thank you.
So let's see here. So I'm going to take a little bit of what John talked about with calcium and kind of build on that, and kind of build out a little bit more on some of the phosphorus and the carbon discussion that we mentioned earlier. We've got one more question here pop up. We'll jump in on that one on the end. David, you're able to stay till the end with us?
Yes. Certainly.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So we'll answer that one at the end. So let's hop into it. Hopefully, if the slide will change. The slide doesn't want to change. Okay. So root development. So as John pointed out, our roots are down in the soil for a very specific reason. They hold the tree up, but they also are there to get nutrition out of the soil. So maintaining a strong, healthy root system is essential to make sure that we actually have nutritional uptake in the plant, and that we can fill our yield goals and hit our quality goals and pounds and everything like that. So the phosphorus, calcium, and carbon are really the three major things we consider when we're looking at how to put together a fertility program to address root strength, and with the information that we can gain from a soil sample, and put together a holistic approach to push root quality and strength, which in turn will push yield and tree vigor. So jumping right into phosphorus, as John pointed out with calcium, how calcium can be very low in our paste extract, but also high in our soil. Phosphorus will have a very similar pattern we can see generally a very high availability on the chemical side, which generally leads to recommendations of low application requirements. However, we see in the soluble side extremely low availability. That just leads back to kind of the inverse of what we were talking about with the calcium relationship with phosphorus. It's the same thing for phosphorus, and the same slide holds true here that we talked about with tie-up. So on the phosphorus side, similar to calcium, that we need to have soil biology to loosen up that nutrition and break down that calcium phosphate bond or those other phosphate compounds within the soil to make those organic acids and those carbonic acids and things like that are going to increase nutrient availability. And poor soil biology will immediately limit nutrient availability, especially in extremely sandy soils where it's hard to keep that soil biology fed and hydrated. It can be a very high limiting factor. So soluble carbon in the soil plays a very important role in that it feeds that soil microbiology and kickstarts its ability to break down those soluble compounds that are not immediately available for plant uptake. That also have the ancillary benefits as well as improving colloid formation within the soil, helping with water movement, and the many other things that generally help with root strength and root health and root development. So there's a cascade of effects there from organic matter improvements. I will say we had a really nice discussion about soil biology and soil organic matter in a webinar that we did several months back that you can find on our YouTube page if you're really interested in kind of how to influence soil biology and how to move organic matter around, and kind of a framework to consider how organic matter functions within the soil. So we'll get a link to that stuck here in the chat box here in a little bit if you want to grab that. The next part of phosphorus is really tie-up, right? So phosphorus is highly reactive. We touched on that, and you can see that from our demo, especially when we add calcium into a system, we can get phosphorus tie-up. We actually see this a lot, and I deal a lot in strawberries here on the coast as well. And we see this a lot where somebody will go out and make a big phosphorus application, and they'll see a bump in plant vigor and blossom development from that additional phosphorus, but then they'll also see a decrease in fruit quality from the tie-up of the calcium that they've also put out. So they have this back and forth jumping where, okay, we put out a bunch of phosphorus and potassium, we see this nice bloom and maybe this nice size increase, but then we also see this decrease in calcium availability and fruit quality. So there's a give and a push also there with when we put out high phosphorus applications. So that, and in a lot of our soils, we have challenges in that way. So sorry, I had a notification pop up for a chat, but it was Sam putting in that soil health YouTube link for you. So soil tie-up is a huge component of phosphorus availability, and many people see this even when taking traditional phosphorus inputs like 1034O and combining it in water that is has high in calcium, that we can see immediate precipitate forming there even. So it's a very prevalent problem with phosphorus inputs. Clicked on the wrong thing. So the solution here is making sure that we apply complex phosphorus that has good availability and will reduce tie-up. When we want to have we have a key timing that we need phosphorus available right now, and the tree doesn't have time to mine it back out of the soil, then we can make sure we apply a phosphorus that's able to be taken up readily by the plant during that key period. So skip that. John did a great job really going deep on the calcium nutrition products and why calcium is important for root development. And I think that these three products are definitely all three unique on the market, and we'll talk about more of those at the end if you have specific questions. On the carbon side for root development, we already talked a little bit here about how carbon and soil organic matter is important for phosphorus availability, but it has a cascade of impacts across many different facets of root development. So the first is organic matter conversion. A lot of organic matter may or may not be actually available or functional, in that it's too big to be broken down into usable components within the soil for the microbial community. And organic matter conversion, think of this, I like to think about this as kind of the big chunks in the soil. You can think the stubble, if you're thinking like corn stubble or something like that, crop residue, big mulch particles, decomposing leaves that aren't big enough aren't small enough for the microbial community to readily use and break down. The increasing organic matter conversion rate can be important and helpful there to get more soluble carbon into the matrix of soil, into the micropore space, and make it more functional in pushing along that soil organic matter and pushing that carbon availability. Likewise, microbial diversity is equally important in that a more diverse soil microbiology will in turn have a more diverse ability to deal with stress as it comes, as well as produce required nutrition for the plant. So microbial diversity can be pushed once again by feeding the biology with a diverse amount of inputs. And then lastly, we have here is limited soluble carbon negatively impacts soil structure, soil health, and root growth. So if we don't have any soluble carbon down there, as Ben mentioned, when we put in additional soluble carbon, we will see an increase in overall crop and overall root quality, soil health, soil structure. This is true in very sandy soils where we have a hard time maintaining soluble carbon, but is also true in really heavy soils where water movement and compaction can be a big challenge. So we see that a lot here in California, where compaction and as well as hard pans can form and things like that, where additional soluble carbon brought into the soil system can be very beneficial for increasing the quality and the tilth of that soil, allowing for better root development and better biological activity, and in turn water movement. And water movement, soluble carbon plays a big role in that. And we have a good webinar that we just did a couple of weeks ago on water movement. We'll have another one coming up on September 3rd where we'll talk at length about water chemistry and water, how to look at water tests and how to do input selections and kind of do an overview of the market of how to improve water movement. And soluble carbon is absolutely part of how we can maintain water movement within the soil, both water retention in sandy soils and even hydration of soil, and also water penetration where we have crusting and things like that. And soluble carbon is going to be important there. And a well-hydrated soil with good structure will improve our overall root system and its ability to push out feeder roots and pick up nutrition and maintain crop vigor. So soil biology, so when we have low soil biology, low organic matter, low soluble carbon, we really see a decrease in overall soil biodiversity as well as activity, and that's going to decrease the amount of metabolites that are being produced and decrease root zone quality. Obviously, I think as I've made this point, as we add in additional soluble carbon, that will push soil biodiversity and push on the ability of the soil to maintain a healthy root system. So coming back to this, so really root development is the key here to maintain a vigorous crop that hits our yield goals. And what are the critical levels of C to use redox products? So got a question here. So what are the critical levels of carbon to use redox products? So the low rates, especially like in sandy soils where a lot of the Florida growers, low rates of soluble carbon applied with each fertility application can be very beneficial to kind of maintain that soluble carbon. We've even seen people do metering pumps and things like that on wells where they're consistently irrigating with soluble carbon inputs to help maintain that on extremely sandy areas. Generally, when we see organic matter dropping below 3%, below 2%, that's when we start thinking, okay, we need to maintain a good soluble carbon program with H85, or we'll talk about RX Platinum here in a little bit, something like that, where we can get extra soluble carbon in. So that's generally where we're looking at, is that percent organic matter. But that percent organic matter is a generality about what overall the amount of carbon is in the soil, and a lot of that carbon can be tied up in larger, less functional forms of soluble carbon, or not soluble, of carbon in the soil. So that organic matter number is definitely something to be taken with a grain of salt. So that's generally where we're going. Now, most redox products, and we'll talk about that here in a moment, most redox products do bring some type of soluble carbon to the soil with application. That's part of the reason that it's there, is to help build that soil community and help build natural release of nutrition out of that soil. So we can talk more about that here in a moment. So now, it's all well and good that we fertilize well, and many people have very strong fertility practices and still can end up in this situation. And really what it comes down to is abiotic stress, right? So abiotic stress is the negative impact of non-living factors on plant growth, yield, and quality. Abiotic stress will reduce photosynthetic activity, plant respiration, cell wall strength, and root growth and metabolism. So all of these abiotic stress will lead to reduced antioxidant production in the plant. This reduction in turn will can lead to increased susceptibility to bacterial, fungal, insect, soil pathogens, and nematode damage. So as David was mentioning earlier, a lot of these agricultural stress mitigators have a cascading impact into our biotic stress realm, and that's a very logical step to make. When you have a stressed out plant, you get more pests. We see that across cropping types. It doesn't matter what it is. When you have a stressed plant, I was in a vineyard yesterday, when they have excess dust on the leaves, you get spider mites. When you have a dripper that's clogged, you get spider mites, and so on and so forth. So now the reason that is so here's our basic kind of plant cycle, right? We have sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. The plant uses photosynthesis to make carbohydrates and other compounds within the plant. So that's your basic biology class. And a lot of the times that's kind of how we just think of plants. This is what they're doing. But there's really a complicated amount of these secondary metabolite pathways that are going on, where these plants are producing all these signaling compounds, phenolic compounds, terpenes, defensive compounds. All these things are being produced within that plant. And the plant has the ability to deal with different stressors. So that's really where the idea of abiotic stress defense comes in, where we are able to help that plant deal with those stress to a better level than what their innate ability might be, because, well, we know what's coming and the plant doesn't. That's one of plants' biggest downfalls, is they can only be reactive to the stress that they're under, whereas we're able to kind of make sure that we try and manage the stress as it comes and make sure they're prepared for it. That's why we irrigate, because we know it's not going to rain, so we irrigate. That's why we put on other things to make sure that that we deal with stress. So there's lots of abiotic stress options. I'm not going to run through these all in depth, but heat and cold, lack of sunlight, soil moisture issues, humidity, precipitation, both too much and too little. We can have agronomic practices that we do on accident on our own. We have too much irrigation, we have too little irrigation. We have chemical injury because we had overspray, or we have, we see this a lot on Roundup Ready crops, where you still get herbicide ding and things like that when you do oversprays. Soil management practices, root development, hard pans, all that, soil and plant nutrition issues. We can put on too much nitrogen, we can put on too little nitrogen. Potassium issues, calcium and silicon. We've talked at length about the number of issues that lack of calcium can cause within a crop, and silicon as well can be lumped into that category. Poor root development. And then I think I wanted to just highlight here, I threw up this leaf here with an obvious micronutrient deficiency on here, and really highlight that inadequate plant nutrition in general will reduce photosynthetic activity and plant metabolism, especially on the micronutrient side. So if we're deficient on manganese or zinc or any or most of the other micronutrients, that plant is going to have an incredibly hard time photosynthesizing. The reason that plant is yellow on those margins, there's no chlorophyll in that region there. And that plant is no longer able to use that leaf, which is its little solar panel, to make energy and make sugar. It's no longer able to do that because of a micronutrient deficiency. So applications of micronutrients are absolutely essential, especially if you have a damaged root system where it's not able to take up and extract micronutrients. Supplementing micronutrients can have a big role in making sure that crop is able to continue to sugar up, as well as size and produce a quality canopy. So that's all I'll say about micronutrients here. We will talk about micronutrients more in another webinar. So really the issues really cascade, right, from we have these abiotic stress factors, and then we have these other factors, these biotic factors that will come in. We have bacterial issues like lack of photosynthetic activity and antioxidant production. fungal slow respiration antioxidant production will encourage fungal populations to grow. Insects love it when we have weak cell walls and low antioxidant production. Think about low calcium in your leaves. Nice tender leaves with excessive nitrogen and lack of calcium will make it so the insect populations are much happier. Nematodes and soil pathogens love poor root development and challenged root systems where we have root stress and the roots aren't able to outgrow the nematode populations. So all these come back to, trying to grow a crop the best we can. And sometimes I think that farming, one of our jobs is in farming is to try and give that plant every advantage it can to produce the yield that we want. And that's, our job is to try and limit the amount of stress we can, all with the economics in mind. So I have two tools here I wanted to show you guys for today to help deal with some of these issues. RootRx, which David mentioned in a previous slide, as well as RX Platinum, which is a 1,7-12, which helps to improve soil health and root growth. So RootRx stimulates root growth and metabolism. It's a botanical extract product. Increases antioxidant production, optimizes root quality and quantity essential for water and nutrient uptake, increases relative strength and viability of root metabolism, as well as stimulates root development and metabolism under conditions of high abiotic stress. And this has really been the cornerstone of a lot of our programs we've seen in citrus markets where we have a lot of root stress. Is RootRx half gallon a couple times a year or light rates more often it's really been the cornerstone of those programs to build that root system and maintain crop vigor and quality under that root stress. It's a unique product on the market. There's nothing else that's really quite in the same botanical extract class as this. And we've seen really consistent results with it. And it blends well with other products, which is really nice. This product can be added to CAN 17. It can be added to CN9. You can put it in with UN32 or whatever KTS. It's just a very versatile liquid product that goes out very nicely. And really the whole goal here with RootRx is pushing that ability of the plant to deal with stress, build those secondary metabolic pathways, and make sure that we can have good root proliferation and nutrient uptake. David, and then here's RX Platinum. I was looking at the wrong slide here. So here's RX Platinum. It improves soil health and root growth. It's a 1,7-12. It brings in several of the different components that we like to think about when we think about root development. It has a nice phosphorus number, and that phosphate in there is complexed with carbon to maintain availability once it goes in the soil, and it really can be a phenomenal phosphate input, as well as it has potassium that's also complexed to allow it to maintain availability and prevent tie-up in the soil and increase plant uptake, as well as provide soluble carbon, as well as has a humic, fulvic, and long-chain carbon component to it. So it has 2% humic acid, as well as a decent amount of other soluble carbon in there to help build that soil organic matter, help build that root structure, and feed that soil microbial diversity. So we get improved phosphorus and potassium availability, improved micronutrient diversity with short, medium, and long chain carbon compounds, and overall an easy handling product with a nice liquid, convenient container. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of products here, because I think we've already talked about a lot of fun facets of agronomy here. And I know David already threw this one up, but I think it's pretty fun to see this lemming canopy quality increasing. It's always nice to see an orchard going back in the right direction after it's been in marginal zone for a little while. And David threw this picture up too, so he stole a little bit of my thunder, but that's okay. He did a lot of work to make this picture happen, so it was a fun thing to see. And I will say that the Redox side, the north side of the trees, most people don't plant rows east-west rows because the north side of the tree generally doesn't get enough sunlight in the fall and winter months, and that was definitely true here. So it was pretty exciting to even see on the north side of the trees that we saw redevelopment of the leaves and a better quality develop, even to a point where it can compete with the south side of the control trees. So it's pretty cool to see that. So just to reiterate, Redox, we're a bionutrient company that focuses on sustainable plant nutrition. I really hope that our passion and excitement for growing plants came across in this talk, and I hope we gave you a couple new things to think about when you're out in the field looking at root development and crop stress. I did want to mention that we have we're going to make a series out of these citrus webinars. We're going to have three of them. The next one will be on August 26th. That's in 2 weeks. Also on Wednesday, same time slot. It'll be a 1 hour event this time. We're going to talk about bricks development, pound solids development, as well as size development. So try and keep it to those topics and how we can try and push those quality goals up and maintain and maintain yield under stress. Will definitely be part of that, but definitely focusing on inputs to push those specifically. So we'll get you an email or a web address for that and a follow-up email here coming soon if you would like to RSVP for that and join us for that as well. With that, I'd like to say thank you. There's my email and cell phone number if you'd like to contact me, as well as John's email there. Check us out on our social media pages. We try to keep those up to date, as well as many of us have our own social medias as well. You can subscribe to. The corporate one is there at Redox Grows across many different platforms, including Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and we're always here to help. If you have some questions, I'd be happy to take them now. And check out that soil. Yeah, so there's a couple things there. So in the chat box for you, if you want to look for those links. So here we go. So we got a question. Can we get a link to rewatch or view this seminar or share it with your friends? Absolutely. So we will have this uploaded to YouTube pretty soon here, and make sure that we've got, it'll be at YouTube. Probably we'll try and get it up this afternoon, but it will definitely be up by tomorrow morning once we get it all put together. And then, okay, sorry, that was Jared's car. But so questions. Let's see. I've got a question here for David. Cytokinins versus auxin-based kelps. Which to use? When to use which? Do you have any input on that, David?
Well, when you start talking cytokinins and auxins, now you're talking plant growth regulators. And in the state of California, we don't talk cytokinins or auxins when we talk about seaweeds. I've tested South Atlantic kelps that are supposed to be heavy in auxins, and North Atlantic are supposed to be heavy in cytokinins. But what I do know is both of these run about 200 parts per billion in the seaweeds. And I've come to a firm conclusion. In fact, Danny even showed, he said, when plants are under stress, they promote these certain compounds that are developed. And when I went to the 2012 meeting in Strasbourg, one of the co-hosts, co-chairs with a French fellow, and I can't remember his name, he put these kelps in perspective, and he says, we can get very specific and say that it's this or that or this. He says, at this point in time, we can't say that. What we can say is it's the soup. It's the whole mixture of phytoalexins and phospholipids and plant growth hormones that come out of them. And we cannot specifically say that any one of these is causing some other effect. Now, there may be people that disagree with me, but I've come to the conclusion that we have not learned that. Now, there's been some genetic testing with these products that show that they do upcharge and down-charge certain genes in Arabidopsis or some other test plants. But again, it's the soup that's doing it, and it's upcharging and downcharging genes that have to do with nitrogen uptake or zinc production or all a number of things. But I don't think we're far enough in our specific research to know the answers. And this is really something reserved for the universities. I think they should be looking into. But I don't. My long answer is I can't tell you. I've had positive results with South African seaweed that are supposedly high in auxins, and I've had very similar results with North Atlantic, and I've had similar results with North Pacific materials coming out of Vancouver Island in Canada. So my long answer is I can't tell you if there's a difference in the concentrations of these and whether they have an influence.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's one of the most frustrating things with a lot of these biostimulant category products is it's the product. It's not a single active ingredient within that product, which is what we're used to thinking of when we think of, a lot of us are trained in pesticides and we think of this is imidacloprid, this is how this functions. It's a very systematic, this is where it's active, this is what it does, this is why it works. And, there's obviously formulation tricks there that chemical companies put in the bottle to make sure that the products work better, but it really comes down to that one active ingredient doing most of the work. And I think that's really one of the most, complex things about this biostimulant market is that it's not like that. It is the soup. It's the whole thing in that bottle. It's every component within there is doing something or has the potential to do something. It's hard to drill down on one thing. So that's why the regulators are not happy with it. So it's hard to nail it down. Okay, any other questions we can help you guys with? What questions might have come up? I know I had one at the beginning about mainstay SI, so maybe I'll answer that now while people are kind of coming up with any other questions they might have. And mainstay SI is a calcium silicate based product that we also produce that's 10% calcium and 22% silicon dioxide. And that we're going to talk at length about that in a later webinar when we're talking about fruit set and retention. And that's really in citrus, that's been where mainstay SI has really been a great tool. We've used it in bloom sprays and really seen great impact on early fruit development as well as late season quality with that early timing. We've also used it targeting flush sprays on crops when we have vegetative flush, trying to go in with mainstay SI to help harden it off and help it deal with stress better, as well as have a more not stiffer. I'm losing my words here. Have a stronger leaf with additional calcium and silicon in it. So we've had a lot of good success there, and we use it in other crops as well. But the question was specifically for citrus. So that was that was where we use that. Greg has a question here. When you talk about soluble carbon, you mean humic substance products, correct? Do you offer any other soluble carbon products? So partially yes, I guess, to answer part of your question. So you mean humic substance products. So a lot of the products do contain humic acid derived from linterdite, but they also contain fulvic acid, as well as Redox. Redox is a big believer in a diverse portfolio, or dividing a diverse portfolio of soluble carbon compounds into the soil. So a lot of these products also contain what we call long chain carbon, which is a size class of soluble carbon that's slightly larger than humic acid. And we see this has a great amount of benefit for pushing beneficial fungal communities where they're more so adapted for breaking down larger carbon compounds. So we see a nice benefit there, as well as amino acids and things like that that can also be beneficial in the soil as well as for foliar application. So, so do you offer any other soluble carbon products? We have several soluble carbon products. I don't have that slide in my presentation, I don't believe, but the which include yeah, I do. Look at that. No, is that it? No, I don't know where it went. We're not going to worry about that. So our flagship soluble carbon product would be H85, which is 85% soluble carbon. And then we also have a fulvic acid product F70, a trichoderma-based product that also has a lot of soluble carbon in it called Dermaplex Plus. So as well as many of our other products also contain soluble carbon. Rutex, Expect, things like that are also high in soluble carbon inputs. So it's definitely one of our major formulating factors that we use is soluble carbon in a lot of our soil applied products. Thanks, Greg. Any other questions? Okay, took a pause there because we're gonna have to cut the video at that point, but I will put this up now because we can't